This is Support is Sexy, episode 484, with Tola Okogwu, author of the children's book series, Daddy, Do My Hair. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I bring you inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and lessons to help you take your business to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm happy to have you here. It just would not be the same without you. And listen, if you are a woman entrepreneur building your business, I want you to know one thing. You do not have to do it alone. This is whether you're building your business or you just have an idea for a business. If you're sitting there trying to figure everything out on your own, or even worse, you're stuck and you won't even move forward with your dream until you feel like you have everything figured out. No, you don't have to do that. What I want you to do is go to supportissexymastermind.com and look at all the information and all the things that you can get by joining a global collective of women entrepreneurs who are there to support each other. Support is at the center of everything that I do, and I am so proud of this mastermind. It's so loving and kind and, of course, supportive in this group, and you get other information to support you with building your business. So please check it out, supportissexymastermind.com. Remember, having it all doesn't mean doing it all alone. Now, today I'm excited about our episode to share with you the story, the journey, and the work of Tola Okogwu. And Tola and I had a great, passionate, as you'll hear, conversation not only about her work, she as an author of the book, Daddy, Do My Hair, which she talks about how she came to that point of writing this book really for her daughter. We talk about representation. We talk about the importance of seeing yourself as a child, certainly, but even as an adult. Tola shares some wise words about windows and mirrors. Make sure you listen out for that, something I had not considered. But also, I love that we talk about walking in your purpose. People talk a lot about purpose, but really, this conversation is about walking in your purpose and how you sometimes, actually, I will say, oftentimes, have to get uncomfortable in different ways in order to truly walk in your purpose, follow your purpose, create work that's meaningful for you. It doesn't have to be quote unquote hard. It certainly doesn't have to hurt, but sometimes you got to get out of your comfort zone. You got to get a little uncomfortable. You have to make a few sacrifices. So Tola shares her journey with doing that. She, her husband, and her family, the great work that she created, and some inspiration for you to do the same. So without further ado, Tola Okogwu. So Tola, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to chat with you.
Same here. Thank you for having me. I'm quite excited also.
Of course. So our first question for you, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
That's an interesting question. It's definitely something that snuck up on me. I think living in Britain, we're very much raised to be worker bees and to be employees and to sort of work that 9 to 5. And I kind of fell into that trap myself, partly because I didn't really know or have an idea what I wanted to do or be. And so I was happy enough to do that for a long time. But of course, I wasn't truly happy and discontent set in. And as I started to explore the things that I enjoyed and love, and I'm quite a creative person, I quickly realized that the 9 to 5 and the normal wasn't going to cut it. And if I was going to be able to fully sort of explore and realize my dreams and potential, I was going to have to think outside of the box. And so being an entrepreneur and entrepreneurship is something I'd never really thought about or consciously decided to do until I realized it would give me the freedom and the opportunities that I needed in order to fully, I think, realize my potential. So for me, it's definitely the way forward, and I always encourage others around me who start, aspire to that, that actually explore it. It will surprise you.
It will surprise you for sure. So you mentioned that you were raised, or a lot of people in Britain are raised to think, sort of like a lot of us here in the US, find a good job, get a career, do it for however many years. People think you're supposed to work a job, but you said you sort of fell into that. But tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you grew up.
Sure. I was actually originally born in Nigeria. I lived in Nigeria for the first 6 years of my life and then moved here when I was obviously 6. My parents were British by birth. They conversely were born in Britain and they moved to Nigeria when they were around the age of 6. So they'd always felt sort of an affinity with Britain and like that was home. So they decided to kind of move the whole family to Britain around 1989. So I moved here when I was 6, lived in an area in London, Southeast London, a Southeast London girl. And so I've had the sort of dual cultures of being Nigerian and the African background, but then also the British culture as well, which is now in many ways my predominant culture. And back to what you were saying about being raised to sort of look for a job, follow a set kind of career, that is very strong in the African culture. Parents very much encourage their children to study hard, get a good job, preferably within the traditional routes, lawyer, accountant,
engineer,
doctor, exactly.
Right.
All those good things. And actually in that area, I was blessed. I have they're progressive parents in that they just wanted us to be happy. They never really pushed us into any particular thing. They wanted us to do the best we could in whatever area we chose, and were happy and free thinking enough. I think probably because my mum was an educator, but happy for us to explore what made us happy. So I didn't feel trapped in that regard. I think what trapped me was not knowing what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be for such a long time. So I kind of just went with the flow. And yeah, I think that was where my trap happened.
How many siblings did you have growing up?
I have an older sister and a younger brother, and it's fascinating because my older sister's a lawyer and she's always known that she wanted to be a lawyer. She's very much about justice and the right thing. So for her, it's a perfect fit. And then my younger brother is quite more creative and quite like me, and also a little bit of a free thinker, and he's more into drama and screenplay and writing and stuff. So it's been a real interesting mix, I think, for my parents.
What would you say that a young Tola was like as a middle child too, and as a little girl? What was your personality wise like?
I was the troublemaker without a doubt.
You were the troublemaker.
I think most middle children are, because we get
Usually.
lost in the shuffle. The eldest gets a lot of attention because they're the eldest. They get the responsibility, and obviously they get benefits from that, and a lot of kind of expectation is placed on them from parents by virtue of being the eldest. And then the youngest tend to get spoilt because they're the baby. And then I think middle children, which is why of course you have middle child syndrome, we can get sometimes a little bit lost in everything that goes on. And I think I was definitely one of those kids. And I wasn't the best behaved child, and I had to apologize to my mom a few years ago when I had my first child, and I've kind of started to understand what I put my parents through. But I was definitely that child. I think for a long time I was lost and confused about my place in this world and who I was meant to be and what I wanted to do. So yeah.
When do you feel like you begin to find yourself? You said you went into a traditional path after. Did you go to university there in London?
I did. I went to university. I studied journalism and sociology because I knew that I liked to write, and I figured, okay, it's creative, because what I didn't want to do is I started, funnily enough, doing economics. I first started an economics degree, and after the first year I was like, no, I can't do this. The maths, it's just no, it's not me at all. So then I moved to journalism, which was a better fit for me, especially given what I do now. But the writing, it definitely appealed and was something I enjoyed far more. However, by the time I was halfway through the course, I did think, I don't actually want to be a journalist. It doesn't give me the freedom that I'm looking for. I realized I was more into creative writing as opposed to kind of writing to someone else's agenda or schedule. And as a Christian as well, I think there are a lot of ethical conflicts that come with being a journalist in this day and age, and having someone else dictating what you write about or cover, especially if you follow the traditional career path. So for me, I definitely followed that more traditional traditional path. And in terms of finding myself, it happened relatively late. I think I wandered around and meandered for most of my 20s, and then at around age 28, yeah, 27, 28. And it was an epiphany. It was a moment. I was in my 9 to 5 at that point. And I tell this story and people are always quite shocked when I say it, but it is my truth. I worked in a basement at that point in time. It was an old Georgian house. It was in the basement. And I remember going down the stairs one morning, or standing at the top of the stairs, looking down and thinking, is there any way that I can throw myself down these stairs, not kill myself, but just enough to maybe break a bone or something so I don't have to go to work?
Oh
And that for
my,
me, yeah, that was a
that was
wake
the
up call.
epiphany.
It really was. And like, if I'm so deeply unhappy about my situation and where I'm at in my life, something has to change, because those thoughts are never going to lead to anywhere good. And that literally was the beginning of the change of everything. Because I went home to my husband, told him that story, and he was like, right, that's it. Something's got to change. And we literally upended our lives after that to be able to put us in the position where we could both, in many ways, pursue our dreams and our desires.
Wow. Well, thank you, first of all, for sharing that powerful moment. And what I'm sure, it might be, well, I don't want to say that it's easier to talk about now. It might be even still difficult to talk about, but I know, having had some low moments like that,
Mm.
and then sharing them later, it's easier to talk about, but there's still that feeling there, or remembering,
Yeah.
that muscle
Yeah.
memory, remembering that
Yeah.
feeling. So
Yeah,
I
it is.
respect that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
No
So
problem.
what was it? Well, a couple of things. One, what was it that, um, in that time or in that space, that you didn't like so much about what you were doing? Was it actually the job, or was it the fact that you didn't feel like you were really fulfilling your purpose or what you really wanted to do? Because I
Yeah.
ask that because sometimes we say, oh, I hate this job, when it's not really the job. It might be more so you're just not doing what you really want to do.
Yeah, you're right. And to be fair, it wasn't the job. It could have been any job. And to be honest, that feeling had been building over the last few jobs that I'd had. They were
Hmm.
just pay the bill type situations. I
Hmm.
didn't feel like I didn't enjoy them. I didn't feel like I was making a difference. I didn't feel like I was having an impact. Nothing was changing. They were just admin jobs. And they were, in many respects, mind numbing, because, of course, I wasn't one doing what I loved. I wasn't doing necessarily what I was meant to do. So I was never going to feel fulfilled doing them. They literally were just to pay the bills. And that was part of the trap, where if you don't have the luck of knowing who you want to be at the point where you're studying and following the traditional path, and you have to make a lot of these decisions that then in many ways kind of set where you're going to, what you're going to do for the next however many years, you then just kind of make choices almost like in a random any miny mo fashion, rather than them being purposeful or without any purpose. So then you make those choices, you then kind of get into the machine of working 9 to 5, your needs grow, you get married, you have kids, you have people dependent on you, you have bills to pay, and it becomes that much harder to come out and try something new, because you've got so many things depending on your current salary. And that's part of the process that we had to go through to create that space, which was really downsizing, so that I wasn't under so much pressure to make a certain amount. So there was a measure of freedom there to try new things, pull back on the hours I was doing in my 9 to 5, and start exploring other avenues that could potentially make money, but didn't necessarily do so when I first started them.
Right. And it sounds like that your moment really helped free your husband too, and thinking, okay, it's time for both of us to really do the things that we wanted to do.
It did, and it's an interesting dynamic with our marriage, because he is an entrepreneur. He is an original, like he's never had a 9 to 5.
Hmm.
He's a musician. He's a musical architect. So he's always worked for himself. He's always had his own business. So he, more than anybody else, understood my frustration and was able to be supportive of where I wanted to go, even though I didn't fully understand it, because he was already living it. He was walking in his dream and on the path he was meant to be. Not that it's easy. Knowing what you're meant to do is just the first step in many ways.
Right.
It's not the magic solution to everything. You still have to put in the hard graft and work. So I think knowing that, okay, it looks like our family dynamic, and we're very different from every other kind of couple that we know, or other people in my family, where most people have more traditional jobs. With what we do, there wasn't necessarily a blueprint to follow or a career path or ladder to follow. So in many ways, we're sort of writing it as we go and making it up as we go along. So that time of sort of reevaluating, reshaping our lives definitely benefited both of us.
You just have one child or two?
We currently have two. I have a 4-year-old, almost 4-year-old, and a 10-month-old.
Okay. How old were your children when you made this change?
Do you know, we didn't have kids at that point. I think it would have been
Okay.
a very different
Different.
story if
Okay.
we had children. I think we would still have done something. We may have done it differently
Right.
because we had kids, but because we didn't, we literally went for the most drastic option
Right.
because we could.
So how did you both what was the discussion after your husband, as you said, saw that and said, okay, we have to make a change? What was it? What was the plan like, just for anyone listening who is either thinking about how to have that discussion with their partner, or maybe they're already talking about it, just of what it could look like, what kind of changes we can make so that we're both happy in this and not just dependent on our jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends where you are financially and what the reasons are, what's trapping you. For us, a large part of it at that point was the financial responsibilities we had, whether our rent, because living, I'm sure it's the same all over the world, but your biggest costs are always going to be accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
So rent, the debts that we had. So it was looking at how we could bring a lot of that stuff down in order so that our living needs were much lower. And so then I could, as I said, drop down to part-time hours and then start to fill the new time I was freeing up with the things that were more fulfilling. So for us, we moved in with my husband's mother
Mm-hmm.
for a few years, which completely, cut down our accommodation costs. We built a debt repayment plan. And I think over a period of 3 to 4 years, we cleared off all our debts.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also part of the plan. And all of that was just about building capacity, building room, both financially and also space as well for other opportunities to come in. And they did. Once I had the room and the space to think outside of the box and try new things, the opportunities came and I was now able to take them up and utilize them.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to be very helpful for people to hear how you did it. Also, that you let me know if I'm wrong about this, but I would imagine there might have been a little bit of, in one way, you're making space for your dream, but in the other way, you're kind of having to make yourself uncomfortable because you don't have your own space anymore and you're not, I'm sure, doing right. I would, living with
Oh,
your
yes.
husband's mom. Yeah, that can
Yeah.
be,
I mean,
yeah,
I adore my mother-in-law. She is the most amazing woman, sweet, loving, kind, giving to a fault. But we're still women. And,
right.
you know, my husband and I hadn't even been married that long at that point. So we're still getting to know each other. So, of course, there was sacrifice and discomfort involved. But there has to be if you're going to make such a phenomenal change. If you
Right.
really, the easy option would be to carry on the same. But I think they're saying this is insanity. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Mm-hmm.
Something has to change. And I think when it's so important and so big, there has to be a measure of coming out of your comfort zone and feeling uncomfortable, and sacrifice as well has to be made in order to achieve it. And if you're not prepared to feel those things or sacrifice, then yeah, it's going to be a much tougher road for you, because to be honest, the life or the work or the journey of an entrepreneur in many ways is uncomfortable, because
Yep.
you are trying to bring about change in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So when then did you discover that children's books was going to be the area of focus for you?
Well, writing came about when I started my hair care blog. So then was when I actually kind of went back into writing, but was now doing it for my own pleasure, at my own pace, my own sort of, I dictated what I wanted to write about. And I grew the blog over quite a few years. And then I
What's the
had
name of your blog?
my blog is called My Long Hair Journey.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I did that for a while and really loved it. I didn't think that it could be um, the business or the moneymaker, or what I was going to do. At that point, I was doing it for the love of it and for the joy of it, which is funny because even back then, my husband was like, "Girl, you need to find a way to."
Kind of
you know
monetize this.
Basically, and he had saying, I was not ready to hear it. And that's the thing, he has a saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, because for many years this student was not ready, and he was saying it all and it was like in one ear out the other, because honestly I wasn't ready. So I did that writing for a while, and that kind of built up my love for it some more. And I thought, you know what, I do want to write a book. I just didn't know what I wanted to write about, what area it would be in. But I thought, once I have my kids, that might put things into focus. And sure enough, when I had my first child, because I'm such an avid reader and I really wanted my children to develop a love for reading like I do. I mean, my first daughter had got her first library card at 6 months, and we just got my youngest library card today. So for me, reading is really, really important. So I was very passionate about, giving her wide access to books. So reading became part of our night routine. And also for me, especially raising Black children, Black girls, outside of the diaspora, it's like we have to be super conscious of their identity, and what they're taking in outside of the home generally has a bigger impact in many ways than what is going on inside of the home. And I suffered a lot of identity issues, not knowing who I was, both as a Black girl, Black woman, African woman. And so for me, recognizing that, it was important to me that my girls have a very strong sense of who they were. And having heard horror stories from friends raising girls of them coming home and saying they hated their hair and they hated their skin color, etc., it really scared me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's not going to happen to my kids. Although I've now discovered that no matter what you do, as hard as you try, those issues will invariably arrive as long as they are out in the world and they're a minority and they go into school and they are a minority. Those things will still creep in.
Right.
So all you can really do is try and give them a strong
counter message.
Yes, and it may not seem apparent immediately that it is doing anything, but I think time will tell. And when they need it, that base that you gave them will be there. So that's just what I'm working on. But having her, I wanted to get as many books as I could with diverse characters so that she could see herself represented. So both in her books, her toys, TV shows, I wanted her to see her, so other Black girls, Black women, and as positive as possible. But it was a bit of a struggle, to be honest, getting even simple things like Black dolls that had Afro hair, not silky straight hair, and books. To get books that had Black characters, I invariably had to order it from America. Or online. I couldn't just go into my local library or go into my local bookshop and get it the way other people take for granted. And it was getting increasingly frustrating. And I remember complaining to my husband one night, and he was like, do you know what? You keep complaining about it, but how about you do something to change it, be part of the solution? And I was like, you know what? Yes, I am. And that's pretty much what inspired that. But even at that point, I still didn't have a story or an idea, but I had now was on that sort of path of thinking that actually I do want to write children's books, and I do want to write books that have diverse characters and diverse stories for children like mine. And so that's how that happened.
And then you went ahead and not only wrote a book, your book, Daddy Do My Hair, right? It's a series. Is it a series?
It is a series. And
right.
3 books in. The 3rd book launches next week, actually.
So, excellent.
Yeah, even how that came about, it was because basically when I finished maternity leave and I went back to work, I was now part-time working 3 days a week. And so my daughter was going into nursery 3 days. And the hours I was doing were very awkward in that I was leaving the house at around 5 a.m. for a 7 a.m. start. So my husband would have to take our daughter to nursery, and I was now faced with the issue of her hair, and she has very delicate edges. So cane row styles and stuff don't really work well for her. They cause more damage. And I didn't want to have to put her hair in a long-term style just because I wasn't there to get her ready on those days. So I was like to my husband, okay, are you willing to learn to do her hair so that I don't have to do those styles and you can do it as needed? And he was totally up for it. As far as he was concerned, he's not a babysitter, he's her father. And he wanted to be able to meet all of her needs as best as he could. So it wasn't like, well, mom's not here, it's all gone to pot. So he was willing to learn. So that was our family dynamic. And I was online one day on Instagram and I saw a picture from a Black artist where there was a Black father and he was sitting on the floor and his Black daughter was between his knees and he was doing her hair. And it was such a powerful image on its own, but then doubly so because of how it reflected my house, my husband, my daughter, and the dynamic between them. And the words, "Daddy, do my hair," popped into my head in that moment. And the first book literally wrote itself in that moment I literally it just all came out of me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had written that first book. And as a writer, it really rarely happens like that. And many people think children's books are easier because they're shorter, but in many ways that makes it harder because you don't have the space to be descriptive as you would in a novel. You have to be concise with your word use. So you have to get the story, get your point, whatever it is you're trying to convey across in very, very small word space, which is actually, if you've ever tried to summarize anything, is actually quite a hard skill to do. But so for the book to have happened that easily and that quickly was pretty rare. But that was the birth of the series.
I love that too, because it reminds me of, when people ask me my favorite episode of the podcast, I always say I don't have favorites, no favorite children. But at this point, I've interviewed, over 300 women. And
Wow.
yeah, episode 26 of the podcast, so I'm up to 400 and something. 26 is one that I mention a lot because the woman who was the guest, Patricia Moreno, she's the creator of a workout called Intensati. And one of the things that she mentioned is the importance of learning how to live the question, and how the answer will show up for you in ways you never imagined. But so many of us, especially as entrepreneurs and as women, being problem solvers, we want to fix it. We want to know how to address things. We're not always comfortable living the question. But I think your example of, having your life experiences with your husband and doing your daughter's hair, and then you're in that space where you were sort of feeling out what you wanted to do and create, but not really sure, even though you knew children's books, you're thinking about what is the story. And then you come across this picture on Instagram that helps the book pretty much write itself. So your story just sort of reminded me of that. And I mention that all the time because when she mentioned that, it totally changed things for me in my business and even in my life, being okay with, I don't know the answer. Here's the question I have. I'm just going to live this question for a little while.
Yeah, that's really deep. I hadn't thought about it like that, but it's so true. And I think in any sort of capacity where you're trying to find it, it's always that, I think as an entrepreneur, that search for a need. Because obviously if you can find a solution to that need or the answer to that question, then, and we're all unique, we're all going to have a different solution and a different way of answering it. So you kind of have to just stay in your lane about it, and also in many ways not worry about what other people are doing or might do in answer to that same need. So that is so deep. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. It just really reminded me of that suggestion that she mentioned. Now, but you didn't only just write your books, you also set up your own publishing company, right?
I did. I in many ways had to, but yes, I did set up, and that definitely wasn't part of the plan and anything that I imagined doing, but it was another thing that arose out of a need and getting to the point where it was like, okay, if I don't do something else, great, I've got this story, but it's never going to see the light of day because the way everybody else does it or has done it is that they get a publishing deal. But if no publisher is interested or willing to publish my book, what do I do? So the publishing company literally rose from that question.
Do you think you're going to plan to publish books by other authors?
That is definitely on our radar. It's definitely something we want to do. We're a few years still off and away from doing that. We're just trying to kind of build the company, learn the industry with our content and our output at the moment. And once we're a bit more secure and established, then definitely we do. Because, there's so many stories like mine out there that need to be told. And the industry is changing, but it's happening too slowly. So I think there is a need for companies like mine who are willing to publish more diverse stories. So we definitely want to be a part of that change and a part of that movement. So it's in the works, it's in the plan.
Excellent. So how would you say that Daddy Do My Hair has been received so far?
It's been phenomenal. It's an interesting one. It's a slightly polarizing title we discovered early on because of the our demographic and the narrative around Black men and Black fathers especially being missing and MIA. So we were discovering whenever we kind of did author visits in schools or did events and stuff that because obviously the book speaks from my truth, and my truth is that male role models in my life have always been very present, very strong. My parents have been married for 37 years now,
Mm-hmm.
So for me, and also with my husband being so active in my children's life, that was my truth, and that's where the story came from. But having taken the book out on the road really shone a spotlight on the absence of Black fathers in many ways. So we would then find that we had to be super sensitive about the book, especially when we're in schools and we're reading it, and the questions we ask to engage children, so that we don't touch raw nerves. So it has been an interesting journey with that. But when you take that side of it out of the equation, the response is phenomenal in so many reasons. It's partly the fact that, the book features Black characters, which is so rare. There's the fact that fathers are being celebrated. That's also very rare.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add in Black fathers, it just becomes, almost standing in a space of its own because of that. And that was important for me, to show Black men, Black fathers, in a positive light, because I don't think it's done nearly enough. So the response we get when we first published the first book and the bound proof came and my daughter saw it, she immediately recognized herself in the character of Beth. Obviously, the character was based around her, even down to the name, but she saw the picture and she said, "That's me."
Oh,
And that's Daddy. And we hear that story time and time again. Like even recently with a new book, I think was sent out to an influencer to review. And one of the things she said was that her daughter thinks she is the character in the book. And people don't realize how profound the effect the absence of something
yes.
can be, because they take it so for granted that to them it is a right. Yet for many people, it's a privilege and one they mostly don't get to enjoy. So that has been profoundly impactful for me. And it's why I wrote the book. So to get that kind of feedback is so encouraging.
Would you say that that's sort of the message that you hope your line of books sends to these girls or young Black children who are looking at these books, sort of, this is you, your story
Yeah,
matters?
it's to be seen, really. And it seems such a small thing, but to actually be seen. And when you think about children and the number one way they learn about the world, it's through books, whether it be reading for pleasure, fiction, or in textbooks in schools. That's the primary way that they take in information. Yet the majority of the books that children around the Western world or the developed world read shows only a very limited view of what people look like or the cultures that exist and stuff. So there's a large section that's being underrepresented or not represented at all. And it has an effect in two ways, in that, because I think of it as mirrors and windows. So you have a section of children who, when they read books, all they ever do is look into a mirror. And so they see themselves represented, and there's a place and a time for that, and that's great. But we need to be able to also look into windows and see other cultures, other people, because that's what's going to normalize and stop those things from being other, is by learning about them, being exposed to them. And then you have the subset of children who are always looking into windows and never get to look in mirrors. And so they then are made to feel othered, because as far as everything they see around them says, they don't exist. And then when they do, it's generally in a negative light.
Yes, I never heard that analogy before, mirrors and windows, but that's very powerful.
Yeah, when I read it in an interview, I forget the author who said it, but for me it just encapsulated
Exactly.
it so completely, and yeah, it has stayed with me till now.
For children, certainly, definitely for children, and I think even for us as adults, this idea of, windows, as you mentioned, really creating a way of having empathy for other people. We're constantly just seeing ourselves and not taking a look outside and looking at other cultures and experiencing other cultures. I talk to a lot of people about this. I guess it's on my mind, but I just think, excuse me, I just think lack of empathy, whether by choice or just not being able to feel for whatever reason, is why we have a lot of the discord, especially here in the United States right now, but even all over the world, just this idea of not being able to relate to someone else's culture or religion or belief or anything.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. And it's something that's been on my mind a lot lately. Like, I used to struggle to understand why, let's take it from a Black perspective. Black people will say, I experience this, I feel this happens to me. And then you get people turning around and negating those experiences,
Mm-hmm.
or just because they can't relate to it. And this happened to me when we had a recent situation with H&M Hennies. They did an ad. They had a sweatshirt that had the slogan "Coolest monkey in the jungle" on
Yes.
their website. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We saw
So
that.
yeah. So, and that hit the news, and it was big. And for me, when it happened, I wasn't necessarily outraged about the jumper because I recognized that it was purely as a result of a company that probably had very few Black employees, especially in position of power, that could have input into that marketing strategy and told them that's probably not a good idea.
Right.
So it was more of a reflection of how business structures look in this day and age and how more diversity is needed. So I wasn't necessarily outraged on that level. I partly recognized it could have been outrage marketing, but I chose to give them the benefit of the doubt. So for me, what kind of triggered me was there was so much reaction saying that we were reacting, those that were outraged by it were being over the top, and that they should calm down, that their feelings were not valid. In fact,
That
what
they don't
actually,
have a right to their anger over that.
basically, there was one interview that I saw where somebody actually said that those who were outraged by it were they in themselves racist because they shouldn't see race. It's not about race. And I was just that. And
That's
so
ridiculous.
I ended up writing an article for a popular newspaper over here about it, talking about how, do you know what? You don't get to tell me how I feel about something,
Mm-hmm.
because the term, and it's ridiculous as well, the term monkey is still used on football pitches to this day in this country as a racial slur towards Black footballers.
Hmm.
And teams are being fined for that. So you cannot tell me that that word is not loaded with a whole load of negative connotations and feelings for Black people. So at the very least, H&M is guilty of insensitivity. So that word is going to trigger people, and they have a right to feel that way. And it's not like racism has gone away, so you can say, oh, get over it. It's not happening anymore. It still is. And without that outrage, change can't happen.
Right. And saying that we don't see race or people shouldn't see race. I
Oh,
always, when people say that, or I don't see color, I know we're totally getting into this, but
I
I don't see color. I
don't.
would say, I actually want, I love being a Black woman. I want you to see it. It's that
Yes.
you're judging people based on
Oh,
their color.
oh,
That's the thing.
you just spoke my mind. I actually had a conversation with somebody on Instagram the other day. Please see color, see my color. It is intrinsically part of who I am. And
Right.
I hate that saying. It doesn't mean anything. It's actually really quite pointless. I don't want you not to see my color.
Right. And it's not true.
It's not true. Exactly. So
Right.
it's even more meaningless. What I want you not to do is judge me, discriminate against me, abuse me because I'm that color. So
Mm-hmm.
see my color by all means, but what are you seeing in addition to that color? So all the negative stuff that you're seeing in addition, and also in many cases you haven't actually experienced, it's a hangover that you've either inherited from your ancestors, or things you've heard, or stereotypes that you have sort of developed for whatever. I totally get you on that. I don't see color thing. It is it's a problematic phrase.
Yes, exactly. And you're there in London and I'm here in the US, and it's still, so for everyone, we have listeners in 130 countries. So we're not just talking about one place. This is a global
It
issue.
is.
Yes.
It
So wherever
really
you are, do not tell a person of color or anyone that you don't see color. You
is.
see it. Just don't love them for who they are.
Yeah, you're effectively saying I don't see you
I
because it
don't
is a
see
part
you.
of who they are. So
Right. Which
yeah.
goes back to your books and your whole mission of making sure that people and children
Mhm.
especially feel seen.
Yeah, see the color, but don't see the color as something to fear.
Right, exactly. So what would you say now looking back? I know it's fairly new still with your business, but what would you say you would advise yourself of, maybe even if not just about your business, but maybe even the earlier part of your journey, if you could go back and give that Tola some words of wisdom, what would you say to her?
Hang on. That literally I would say hang on, because it will all make sense eventually. Because I definitely feel like I took the long about the Israelites journey about this, and really it was very long-winded, but I do now recognize it was for a purpose, because much of what I have learned, skills, even just on a basic level of skills, because having this business, a lot of it I do myself. I co-own it with my mother, who, as I said, incredibly supportive, but a lot of the day-to-day, by virtue of she still works and stuff, and I have more of the skill sets needed. I do myself, from creating the websites to laying out the books to the bookkeeping and the general admin and the social media. And a lot of those skills I learnt going on that journey. And if I hadn't gone on that journey, I wouldn't be equipped to do and to have really taken ownership and maximize the opportunities when they finally came. So to the younger me, I will say it will make sense. It seems crazy and tough and you just don't understand it right now, but hang in there because, yeah, it's definitely going to work out.
Mm-hmm. Now, what process did you go through in order to have your books printed and that kind of thing, just from a tactical standpoint for anyone's listening? What were your steps for doing that?
So for us, once we decided that we wanted to self-publish, and there's many ways that you can self-publish. And unfortunately, self-publishing has a bit of a negative and a bad reputation in the industry because it is seemingly so easy for anybody to self-publish a book nowadays. There is a lot of poor quality output, which within an industry that's already slightly elitist has kind of created that those negative associations. So when we decided we were going to self-publish, for us, it was very important that the output be high. That basically, if our book was on a shelf with another book by any other publisher, you could not tell the difference. You couldn't say that, oh yeah, that's the self-published one just by looking at it. So quality was always our focus. And we also decided to, because one of the hardest parts of being a self-publisher is the lack of funds and not having access to the distribution network, which a lot of the big publishers do. So being able to get your books into bookshops, libraries, that's incredibly difficult, to almost impossible for self-publishers. So for us, our focus was to be able to get our books as widely available as possible. So in setting up the publishing company, even though at the start we knew we were going to publish our works, we knew we wanted to be at the place where we could publish other people's works. So we've modeled it closely to the traditional route in terms of being able to have access to the distribution networks, get a wholesaler, etc. But we still operate as a self-publisher in terms of being able to decide when and what we publish. So I mean, for us, because we do picture books, obviously we had to, once we had the story, we had to get an illustrator, we had to do editing, which is all part of that quality assurance and making sure that the output is a very high standard. So you go through the editing process, getting an illustrator, laying out stuff, and then obviously once you have to get a distributor because we print in bulk. So on average, we do print runs of about 2,000 books. So somewhere that's got to be stored somewhere. So we have a distributor where the books live, and they are in charge of when a bookshop, for example, or library orders it, they fulfill that order. So we've been blessed, especially as a self-publisher, to have been able to get access to a distributor because it's incredibly rare and difficult to get that. And that makes a difference between whether your books can be purchased by a bookshop, by a library, by a school. So a lot of that for me, as I said, as a Christian, a lot of that I do believe that was God that did it, because it wasn't necessarily, because we've been learning on the job as we've been going. And to be honest, if I was to do it over, a lot of the stuff that I know now, I would have done things a bit differently with the first book, but obviously that's experience and that's knowledge.
What would you say is one of the things that you might have done differently now that you know better?
Ooh, one of the things that I would have done differently. I think when it comes to the distribution and sales side of it, we underestimated how important it is, because the publishing industry, relies on sales reps, they're called. And basically their job is they have a selection of titles that they're given by a publisher, and they peddle it to bookshops. So they will do the footwork of going into bookshops, speaking to buyers from the big chains and independents, and basically selling these titles into them. And actually I underestimated or didn't fully understand how important this role is in really getting your books picked up by bookshops and getting those sales. So I think if could have done it again, we would have put more thought and emphasis into that. We got lucky and we were able to eventually get that, but I think it's definitely something I'd have done more research on. But as I said, we eventually did get somebody, and we've been really blessed in that area, but I definitely would have pumped more resources into that area and understanding how that process works.
What would you say entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself as a woman?
This is probably going to be not necessarily a popular opinion, but it's my opinion. So I think that as a woman, I've learned that it's not possible to have it all of the time, especially as a mother. Something has to give. You cannot go full throttle on the business side of things, on the work side of things, career side of things, and not expect it to have an impact on your children in some way, shape, or form. I experienced it as a child of a working mother, and now as a working mother, it's the daily struggle that I have of, am I neglecting my children? Do they have everything they need? Are they getting enough me time? Am I on my phone too much? Oh, I missed that. I dropped this. It's a constant juggling act and a constant battle. And I still haven't found the balance. Like, I'm trying to implement digital detox at the moment because my daughter, in the mornings when she comes to my room and wakes me up, there's two things that she picks up from mummy: my glasses and my phone. So already she's learned to associate that phone is something that's essential to me. So I've had to stop and really look at how I use my phone around her. And it's just little struggles like that. So I think that it's never been so good to be a woman. And we have so many opportunities now, and it's great. But we can't lose sight either. Or I think, I'm trying to be careful about how I say this, but
No, just say.
Yeah, I don't want to trigger any feminists, because I do definitely, as I said, I recognize it's the times that we're living in and how amazing it is for us. But as mothers, and I will be specific in that realm, as mothers, there is always an opportunity cost. There is always a repercussion to whatever decision that you make. So I think we sometimes do ourselves a disservice in thinking, because it's so good and because there's so many opportunities, and it's not perfect, there's still a lot of change that needs to happen, but thinking that we can have it all, as I said, all of the time, without there being as I said, a fallout or some sort of impact. There will be. So as I said, it's living that balance, finding that balance. And there will be times when perhaps the business has to have more of your time and attention, but recognize it. So then you can have to put some things in place. If you have a supportive partner, they can step up. And perhaps in that moment, they will take the front line while you're concentrating on your business, so that the children aren't suffering for it. But I think it's just having that awareness and recognizing it, so it doesn't blindside you, or years down the line, your kids turn around and say, well, you weren't there when I needed you, or something like that.
Right. I always tell, when people talk about balance, I think of when you see those acrobats walking across the tightrope with the bar in their hand, and they don't usually just have it straight. Sometimes they have to put a little bit more weight on the left side. Sometimes you got to put a bit more weight on the right side to keep it balanced. So that's always what I envision. Like you said, sometimes one thing needs a little bit more attention, but you're conscious that you have to tilt it back the other way too, to kind of keep it in between. And we're all walking that line in one way.
Yeah, but I do think women, it's a massive generalization, but I think we are uniquely built to do that juggling act. I was actually having a conversation with my husband about it today, because an opportunity had come up and I wasn't immediately jumping on it, because in my mind, I'm having to do the calculations of the kids. Where am I going to put them, and all this and all that? So he's all like, oh, you should be doing this, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, actually, I have to think about the opportunity cost and do the benefits of doing that action. Does it make enough sense for all the work that has to go in to make it happen? And we end up having a whole debate about it, until I just said, you know what? When you make a work decision, you never have to consider the kids or what happens to them. It's not even anything that, it's not, anything that factors into your calculations, but it's something that I always have to think about. And that's unique to working mothers in many, many ways. So, yeah.
I remember when one of my close friends, Tiaya is her name, in New York, and this is when her son, I think, is about to go to college. So this is a lesson from when he was a baby. And I remember her, I don't know what we were planning to do, trying to go somewhere or something. And she made the statement sort of that just for her to go to get a manicure at that time requires a lot of planning, So she was making the point is it's just like not necessarily just up and go. As you said, there's just so many other things to consider as a mom. Like, okay, if I go, is the child going to stay with my mom or my husband? Is he going to be home? She's just like, now everything just requires so much planning. And I remember thinking, I never thought about that, unless you're just going to take the baby with you, which in some cases that might not be appropriate.
Yeah, it might not.
So it just gave me a new respect and that was about 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's a fundamental difference, I think, between men and women, especially when that whole children comes into play, and that's unique to women. And it is something that has to be factored in. But as I said, I think we are more than capable of doing that juggling act. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in closing, if you think over your life and career, and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
Oh, that's a tough one because it's me. It's two, and it's two because of the two different kind of points in my life. In so many ways, I recognize that a lot of who I am and what I do and have been able to do is a result of my mother, whether it be the example that she set, and seeing how hard she worked to make it possible for us, her children, to be able to achieve our dreams, and the freedom in terms of the freedom of our upbringing and the freedom in mentality that she gave us as well, that has allowed us to kind of all find our spaces without fear of disappointing them, and be our own individual people. Your parents can have on you, they can really hold you back, especially because if you love your parents, you want them to be proud of you and you crave their approval. So for a lot of people, it can be something that holds them back. So in one side, it's my mother, and then the other half, it's my husband, because a lot of who I am now has been shaped and molded in the fire of marriage, in terms of the support. Because in many ways, through our marriage, as well as being husband, he's in many sometimes had to be father role, and lead the way, and just the support that he constantly gives, and the pushing. Like, he's my number one cheerleader, but he's always the first to pull me up and chastise me if I've gone out of turn. Do you know what I mean? So I would not be the woman I am. I would know without a fact I would not be doing any of what I'm doing now if he hadn't been there, and if he wasn't the man that he was. So for me, those are my MVPs.
Oh, that's beautiful. We'll accept that. You definitely deserve, those two deserves a shout out. That's beautiful. Now tell us the ways that we can support you and how we can support your company, Florence Elizabeth. Is that named after your children?
Well, it's actually my mother's Florence. So
your
Florence is my mom, and then Elizabeth is my firstborn. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Yeah. So tell us how we can support you, your website or social media, whatever you want to share.
Yeah. So the website that you'll get most of the information from is mine, which is tolaokogwu.com. And of course, with the books, which are the Daddy Do My Hair series, you can also check them out at www.daddydomyhair.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, Tola Okogwu. So it'll just be Twitter, Instagram /Tola Okogwu. So it's all pretty simple and straightforward. Same with Daddy Do My Hair. But as I said, tolaokogwu.com has all the links to everything you can find out about me.
Excellent. Tola, such a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I know we didn't really get off track. We brought it back.
Yes.
Brought it back. It all related. So I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for having a show like this that creates that platform for people like me, entrepreneurs like me. It's very much needed. So thank you.
Absolutely. Now, before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything?
I would say that you need to believe in yourself and your truth, because that belief is going to be tested time and time again. And really, sometimes the only thing that's going to get you out of bed is that belief. And at the heart of it, if you don't have that belief, and if you don't believe in yourself, you're never going to be able to convince anyone else to. So yeah, just believe in you.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Tola, and I hope you feel inspired after hearing it. Now, to find out more about her, to get in touch with her, to find out more about her book series, make sure you go to supportissexypodcast.com. Go to that search icon at the top and just search Tola, Tola. Her show notes page will pop up with links and resources, and again, all the ways to get in touch with her. SupportIsSexy.podcast.com and just search Tola. Thank you so much. You know what? You all inspire me. Thank you for being here because you inspire me. The fact that I know that you're listening, you're out there, you give me great feedback, which doesn't always mean you like everything we do, but you always make me better. I appreciate you helping me walk in my purpose. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, until we chat again, always remember that you deserve support, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.